Max Verstappen just did something that is making Formula One drivers very uncomfortable. He jumped into a Mercedes GT3 car at the Nurburgring, one of the most dangerous circuits on Earth, and immediately qualified fourth against elite endurance racing specialists. Not 10th. Not 15th. 4th. And the terrifying part is how close he actually was to pole position. Over a lap with more than 150 corners and over 25 kilometers of pure chaos, Verstappen finished less than 1 second away from the fastest car. That is the kind of gap that changes how drivers see you. But here is where the story explodes. Mercedes removed Verstappen from the car before the final pole session, even after he delivered one of the fastest laps of the entire weekend. Why would they do that? What did the team already understand about Max that everyone else was only beginning to realize? Because inside the Nurburgring paddock, one dangerous idea started spreading very quickly. Max Verstappen is no longer just dominating Formula One. He might be naturally built to dominate endurance racing too. And once darkness, rain, and traffic hit the green hell, this race could become the moment the entire motorsport world sees Verstappen differently forever. At first, most people thought this was just a fun weekend for Verstappen. A Formula One champion trying something different. A side project. A cool headline before the next Grand Prix. But then the Nürburgring started exposing the truth. Because this circuit does not care who you are. World champions struggle here. Experienced endurance drivers make mistakes here. One tiny error can destroy an entire weekend instantly. And that is what made Verstappen's performance so shocking. He did not arrive looking cautious. He arrived looking comfortable. The Nürburgring Nordschleife is not a normal racing circuit. It stretches more than 25 kilometers through forests, hills, blind corners, bumps, and sections so narrow they feel like public roads at insane speed. There are more than 150 corners. Some arrive uphill. Some disappear downhill. Some tighten unexpectedly while drivers are already fully committed. Imagine sprinting through a mountain road in the dark while every mistake waits behind a metal barrier. That is the green hell. And Verstappen adapted frighteningly fast. Thursday already gave people their first warning sign. The conditions were terrible. Semi-wet track, cold temperatures, yellow flags everywhere. Normally, that kind of session rewards pure Nürburgring specialists. Drivers who have spent years memorizing every dangerous section. But Verstappen still delivered one of the fastest laps. Then Friday changed everything. Dry conditions arrived. The track gained grip. The Mercedes suddenly came alive. And Verstappen responded with an 8-minute, 11.614 lap during top qualifying too. That single lap sent shockwaves through the paddock. Because the gap to pole position was less than half a second. Over 25 kilometers. That sounds unreal. It is like two runners completing an entire marathon and finishing separated by half a step. And this is where Formula One drivers quietly started paying attention. Because Verstappen was not driving against amateurs. These were elite GT specialists. Drivers who dedicate entire careers to endurance racing. Some know the Nürburgring better than certain Formula One drivers know Monaco. And Max immediately looked like he belonged with them. But here is where the story becomes even more dangerous for the rest of motorsport. The team did not celebrate like outsiders getting lucky. They acted calm, focused, almost expected. That tells you something important. Inside the Verstappen racing garage, they already knew the car had real speed. The report even confirms the Mercedes had genuine pace capable of fighting for victory. And suddenly, this stopped feeling like a celebrity appearance. Now it looked like a serious endurance racing project. Especially because Verstappen himself sounded completely obsessed with one thing. Winning. Not participating. Not learning. Winning. That mentality changes everything at the Nürburgring. Because this place destroys drivers mentally before it destroys them physically. The pressure never disappears. Traffic never stops. One moment of lost concentration can erase hours of work instantly. And strangely, Verstappen looks built for exactly that environment. Calm under chaos. Precise under pressure. Aggressive without losing control. Those qualities matter even more in endurance racing than raw speed. And deep inside the paddock, one uncomfortable question started spreading. If Verstappen can become this fast, this quickly, in one of the hardest races on Earth, what happens if he fully commits to endurance racing one day? But the deeper this weekend went, the more uncomfortable the situation became for the rest of the field. Because Verstappen was not just showing speed. He was showing control. And at the Nürburgring, control is everything. Anybody can push hard for one lap. Very few drivers can stay precise for hours around a circuit this dangerous. That is why Mercedes made the decision that confused almost everyone watching. Before the final pole shootout, Verstappen stepped out of the car. Instead, the team handed the Mercedes to Danny Juncadella, one of the most experienced Nurburgring specialists in the field. At first, fans thought it made no sense. Why remove the driver who just delivered one of the fastest laps of the weekend? But the answer reveals how serious Verstappen racing actually is. This team was already thinking about the full 24-hour war ahead. Not one qualifying lap. The Nürburgring punishes drivers differently from Formula 1. In Formula 1, a race lasts around 2 hours. At the Nürburgring, concentration must survive an entire day and night. Drivers fight traffic constantly. Weather changes corner by corner. And fatigue becomes dangerous. Imagine trying to solve impossible math problems while sprinting through a thunderstorm for 24 straight hours. That is endurance racing here. So Verstappen Racing protected Max before the race even started. No unnecessary risks. No emotional decisions. Just strategy. And that strategy may already be terrifying the competition. Because the numbers hidden behind qualifying tell a much bigger story. The Mercedes was not barely surviving near the front. It had real pace. The gap between Verstappen's qualifying lap and pole position was less than 0.5 of a second over the entire Nordschleife. That difference is microscopic. Especially on a track this enormous. And suddenly, rival teams started realizing something dangerous. Verstappen Racing might actually have one of the strongest overall packages in the entire event. Especially because endurance racing rewards consistency more than pure aggression. That is important. The Lamborghinis on the front row looked explosive over one lap. But endurance races are brutal on machinery. Cars suffer damage. Brakes overheat. Engines get pushed for hours without rest. And historically, reliability becomes more important than qualifying position once the race enters the night. That is where Mercedes starts looking extremely dangerous. Because the Mercedes-AMG GT3 has a reputation for surviving punishment. And Verstappen's driving style suddenly fits endurance racing almost perfectly. Aggressive when necessary. Smooth when protecting the car. Calm under pressure. Fast in changing conditions. That last part matters more than people realize. Because according to the report, rain could become the biggest factor of the entire race. And rain at the Nürburgring is chaos. Not normal chaos. Complete chaos. Parts of the track become slippery while others stay dry. Fog rolls through the forest. Visibility disappears instantly. Drivers arrive at corners trusting memory more than eyesight. That environment destroys confidence. But Verstappen usually becomes stronger when conditions get worse. We have seen it repeatedly in Formula 1. Wet races. Changing grip. Pressure moments. He stays calm while others panic. And now people inside the paddock are starting to connect all the pieces together. That is why Formula 1 drivers are paying attention. Because this no longer looks like Max experimenting outside his comfort zone. It looks like another version of Verstappen becoming dangerous somewhere new. And maybe the most revealing detail of all came from Verstappen himself. Before the weekend even began, the team described success with one simple idea. Winning. Not surviving. Not gaining experience. Winning. That single mindset changed how everybody viewed this project. Because once Max Verstappen decides something matters, he rarely approaches it halfway. And if he survives the night near the front, the final hours of this race could become something much bigger than a GT event. It could become the moment the motorsport world realizes Verstappen's talent may be far more universal than anyone expected. And this is where the Nürburgring starts revealing who drivers really are. Because once the race begins, speed stops being the main challenge. Now it becomes survival. More than 100 cars sharing the same circuit. Different categories. Different speeds. Different levels of experience. All fighting through narrow sections of asphalt surrounded by grass, barriers, and darkness. Imagine driving through a crowded highway at nearly 300 kilometers per hour, except the road twists through a forest, visibility changes constantly, and one mistake can end your race immediately. That is what Verstappen is stepping into. And suddenly, Formula 1 drivers are realizing something uncomfortable. Max does not look overwhelmed by any of it. He looks prepared. That may be the scariest part of this entire story. Because endurance racing usually humbles newcomers. Even elite drivers need time to adapt. Traffic management alone becomes exhausting. At the Nürburgring, faster GT3 cars constantly catch slower traffic in dangerous corners. Drivers must make split-second decisions every few seconds. Pass now? Wait. Risk it? Protect the car? Those choices decide races. And Verstappen already looks incredibly natural handling that pressure. But here is where things become even more dangerous for everyone else. Starting fourth may actually be the perfect scenario for Verstappen Racing. That sounds strange at first. Most people think starting first is always best. At the Nurburgring, the front row can become a trap. The opening laps are chaos. Cars fight aggressively for position while traffic immediately starts building. One tiny incident can destroy the race before it even settles down. But fourth gives Verstappen racing something extremely valuable: space. Enough room to stay close to the leaders without becoming trapped inside the madness of the first corners. And over 24 hours, avoiding chaos early can become more important than leading early. That is why experienced endurance teams think differently. They do not panic. They calculate. Lap after lap. Hour after hour. And the deeper this race goes, the more that mentality could favor Verstappen. Especially once nighttime arrives. Because nighttime at the Nürburgring changes everything psychologically. The forest becomes black. Fog starts appearing in random sections. Headlights bounce through mirrors constantly. Drivers lose all sense of rhythm. Fatigue builds slowly until concentration starts fading. That is usually when mistakes begin. But Verstappen's mentality may be perfectly suited for that environment. We have already seen how calm he becomes under pressure in Formula 1. Wet races. Late race restarts. Chaotic conditions. The more unstable the situation becomes, the sharper he often looks. And according to the report, rain could become one of the decisive factors of the weekend. That changes everything. Because rain at the Nürburgring is not predictable. One corner feels dry. The next feels like ice. Drivers commit to braking points without fully knowing what grip level waits ahead. That uncertainty destroys confidence. But confidence has never looked like a problem for Verstappen. And now rival drivers are starting to understand the bigger issue. If Max can adapt this quickly to one of the hardest races in motorsport, how far could he actually go in endurance racing? Because this no longer feels temporary. It feels natural. And maybe that is why the atmosphere around the paddock shifted so dramatically after qualifying. People stopped reacting like Verstappen was visiting their world. Now it feels like he might belong in it. Which creates a fascinating possibility nobody can ignore anymore. What happens if a driver already dominating Formula 1 starts mastering endurance racing too? Because if Verstappen survives the night near the front, Sunday morning could become the moment this entire race changes from a surprise story into the beginning of something much bigger.